We learned parts of speech so that we could learn to identify the subject and verb, and we learned that so that we can identify clauses, specifically independent and dependent clauses. So an independent clause was just a simple sentence, just I go to the store. Go is a verb, I is the subject that's doing it. It's just one simple idea. And we talked about how that could be, it could have a bunch of prepositional phrases and other stuff in it, or it could be something as simple as it is, where you have a verb, you have a subject, it makes sense by itself. That doesn't mean contextually you understand the story behind the sentence completely. It just means grammatically it can stand alone. So to be an independent clause, it's got to have a verb, it's got to have a subject, and it's got to make sense by itself grammatically. Like it is. That's fine. A dependent clause is the same thing. It also needs a verb, it also needs a subject, it also needs to make sense by itself. But then it has another word in front of it that makes it not make sense by itself. That is, every dependent clause has to have an independent clause in it. But it must also have a subordinating conjunction in front of it. So rather than it is, you have when it is, or if it is, or since it is, and then you've got to remember that a dependent clause is never a complete sentence by itself. An independent clause always is. You will never just see a dependent clause sitting there. If you do, it's a sentence fragment. Because what they do is, you have something like, since it is my birthday, comma, since it is my birthday, what? Yes. I'm going to eat cake. Okay, so I'm going to eat cake is an independent clause. You have the verb am. You have the subject I. Whoops. Yeah, you have the verb am, subject I, makes sense by itself. And then you have another one here, another independent clause. You have a verb, a subject makes sense by itself, but then it has a subordinating conjunction in front of it. So that means this clause, this dependent clause, can now get attached to this independent clause, and they can form some meaning together. Okay. Let's review our dependent clauses. All right, so what are the subordinating conjunctions? Remember, you've got this silly word, vista. After as, when, whenever, or wherever, while, until, unless, before, because, if, since, though, although. And I told you to memorize those. I was calling on you individually to spout them off, yes? Can you still do it? What's the word to remember the subordinating conjunctions? Vista. What are the subordinating conjunctions?
After, as, when, whenever, while, unless, until, before, because, if, since, though, although.
Nice. And what are those words? The vista words, what are they called? What kind of conjunctions are they? Subordinating conjunctions. As opposed to what? What are the other kind? Coordinating. Excellent work. Okay. So you got coordinating conjunctions, fanboys, for and or but or yet so, and then the subordinating conjunctions, these guys. Okay. And then sample sentences here. So on a test, I'm going to have a sentence like this, and then just part of it will be in bold or underlined or indicated in some way. So you'll be asked to identify what this part is. Whenever I shower, what is that? Is it an independent clause? Is it a dependent clause? or is it something else? It is a dependent clause, right? Because you go through the checklist. Yes, it has an independent clause. It has a verb, it has a subject, and this would make sense by itself. It would be an independent clause until you have this word in front of it, and this word in front of it is a subordinating conjunction. So, yeah, you got it. Verb, subject, makes sense by itself until you put the subordinating conjunction in front of it. It does have a subordinating conjunction in front of it. So this is now a dependent clause. Okay? Good. Combined with this independent clause, it creates meaning. Okay. So the next one, this section of it will be in bold. What's that? Independent clause, dependent clause, or something else? It would be a prepositional phrase. It's something else because the word to is a preposition, right? The pencil goes to the desk. And then you've got this to what? Now, we talked about these a little bit before. This is actually an infinitive phrase, which is to plus a verb, but it's still something you can get rid of in a sentence. Anyway, it's not a dependent clause. To is not a subordinating conjunction. And sing in the rain, it's not a complete sentence. Yeah, it's a prepositional phrase. Okay. Now, this one. This is in bold. I heard that you like singing. What's that? Independent clause, dependent clause, or something else? So this one's the trick. It is also a dependent clause. This one is to remind you that this has a verb, this has a subject, this would make sense by itself, it would be an independent clause, and then the problem is you're looking at this and saying, well, that's not on the Awubista list, so it's not a dependent clause. So there are some subordinating conjunctions like that and wherever that don't really make the list, but they're still subordinating conjunctions. So the word that, why doesn't it go on the list? Why wouldn't it be Awubista or something? Because it would create more confusion than it would alleviate by being on the list. Because you have, look at this. If I say, that is great, or that thing is great, or I think that it is great. So in this sentence, at the top, what part of speech is the word that? It's a pronoun. It's standing in for something. We don't know what it is, but it's representing a thing. It's a pronoun. What about in this one? What part of speech is the word that here? Yeah, it's an adjective because it's telling you what kind of thing. Okay, and then in this sentence, what is it? Yeah, here it's a subordinating conjunction that's linking together these two sentences. So if I put it on the list, the worry is that these ones, which are probably more important later for writing essays, will get confused. So just be aware there are other ones, but if it's a subordinating conjunction, it'll be doing the same kind of thing that after, as, when, whenever, and these other subordinating conjunctions are doing. They'll be linking together two complete sentences. Okay, I won't put them on quizzes for quite a while until you're very comfortable with these. Okay, then this one. So this is in bold. Before you go, I have something to say. What is that? An independent clause, a dependent clause, or something else? Just this part? So you got a verb, you got a subject. It would make sense by itself, but then you have this word in front of it, SC. Yeah, that is a perfect dependent clause. Okay, great. What's this? Before noon, I always eat a steak. What's that one?
Wouldn't that still be a dependent clause?
Okay. One would think, because this one here, they're doing the exact same thing in the sentence, right? They're giving these preconditions for the action that takes place after them. And yeah, idea-wise that works, but grammatically not exactly. So remember, a dependent clause needs a verb, a subject. It needs to contain an independent clause, but the word noon is not, it's not a verb. It's not a sentence all by itself. It doesn't quite work. So what is it if it's not a dependent clause? Well, it's not a complete sentence, so it's not an independent clause. Yeah. Right. So the word before is a preposition, and then the word noon is just a noun. So, you know, if you had tested that out beforehand, got all of your parts of speech in this sentence, you would say, well, the word before, that's, you know, the pencil in the desk. The pencil goes before the desk. Yeah, that works, right? So you would have identified that as a prepositional phrase. It doesn't matter a lot for simple sentences like this, for comma placement. They end up being the same, but I still want you to know them for other things that will come. All right, now the reason I'm putting these two together is to remind you that most of the subordinating conjunctions can also be prepositions, right? The pencil goes after the desk. The pencil is as the desk. The pencil goes before the desk. The pencil goes after the desk. These are prepositions. And how do you know? Well, for parts of speech questions, I usually don't put in subordinating conjunctions, but you know it's a subordinating conjunction if it's linking together two complete sentences. Okay?